First of all, on behalf of the Oro Valley Historical Society, I'd like to welcome you this afternoon to our fourth and final panel discussion, moderated by Jim Williams, who is our past president, current historian, and author of the book, Oro Valley, the First 50 Years. If you all haven't read it, you should, because there's going to be a quiz. Seriously, we're delighted that you all are here this afternoon. Thank you very much for coming. If you missed the second and third moderated panel, go to our website, ovhistory.org, because they are both on that. The first one we had a little glitch, but we'll make it up to all of our supporters, and we'll get something else on the website. You don't know it yet. Anyway, I hope you all are in the midst of celebrating Oro Valley's history with the first 50 years. We had a great time at the parade on Saturday. This coming Saturday, Oro Valley Historical Society will be participating in the big event down at James D. Creek Park. We will also have the Push House open for second Saturdays so that you can see what we put together talking about the history of making this town a town. Also, Jim has some announcements.
Okay, thank you, Devin. I did want to mention the Ashley Bowerman from KOLD has been doing a lot of videotape segments, talking to a lot of different people. I think she's talked to you, Dick, and those segments are going to be on starting tonight at the 6 o'clock news, and also the Fox News at 9 o'clock. So there will be different segments on about Oro Valley history. I don't know what the sequence is going to be, but they will be on, she told me, on the 6 o'clock news, and then the same thing will be repeated on the 9 o'clock Fox News. So I'm talking about the CBS station and the Fox station. Everybody has different channel numbers for what these are. And I just want to mention, I'm also going to be doing a course here on a 2-week class on Oro Valley history on May 13th and May 20th. And it'll be in this room, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They're both Mondays. I did this about 5 or 6 years ago, and I'm going to update it with some information from my new book. And it's open to the public, and you can come one day or the other day or both days. I mean, there's no enrollment or anything like that for it. Okay, so my name is Jim Williams. I'm the head of the Speakers Committee this year, and we've been doing, as Devin mentioned, a series of talks on Oro Valley history, which we've been videotaping for history, so that there's a record in the future of all of this. And today we're going to be talking about some of the early history. And on my far right is Fred Roof, who was the first official police chief of the town. There was a police force presence before him, but I think he could safely be called the first official chief. And on my immediate right, Sidney Felker, who was an attorney and a young attorney at that time. He was telling me had just gotten out of law school, and he was involved in helping the incorporators through all the legal fights, because that went on for about 5 years of legal fights at the local county level and also at the state Supreme Court level. So my first question to both of these, and this is going to be kind of informal today, I'm hoping they'll share some stories. Why and when did you move or start working here, and what attracted you? Fred, why don't you start with that?
Oh, boy. Well, I was looking for a job. I was a lieutenant with Rural Metro Fire Department in charge of their security operations. And the security operations at that time, we had mobile patrol units. We'd have a slip-on fire tank on the back of a patrol truck, and we would patrol new communities that were out in the county. And since the sheriff had limited resources and response times, we would be there as the eyes and the ears and try to keep vandals and those that wanted to do harm away from these new communities. So when I heard about Oro Valley and the problems they had of trying to set up a police department, I thought, well, I asked my boss in Scottsdale, I said, Ron, what do you think? I sent him a letter and say, offer security services to the town of Oro Valley. He says, why not? It wouldn't hurt. So I was hoping Lauren Rude would be here today because he would chide me something unbelievably. I wrote a letter to Dr. Rude, Lauren Rude, who was a council member, and he was going to be setting up the police departments and explaining what we did. Well, that was the time when you had a typewriter and you had mimeograph paper. Well, anyone knows me, my spelling is deplorable, always has been and probably still will be. And they didn't have spell check. So I sent this letter to Lauren and we heard from him, he said, yeah, we'll get back with you. And okay, then we received a phone call saying, would you come and talk to the mayor and council? Now, the council chambers, if you know where 9040 North Oracle Road, it's between Kayak and Cordy and Hardy. It's a little apartment complex, and there's a art studio in there at this time. We were in Suite D. Now, the council chambers was the master bedroom. And everything took place. So when you came before the bench or the council, you sat on a 2x12 bench that was held up by 2 cinder blocks. And if you got too many in there, it kind of bowed in the middle. So we got Ron Butler, my boss, and I presented a scenario that how we could help. We weren't thinking about a police department or anything, but how we can do security patrol for the town and make the town a little bit safer. And we did have contracts over at Tucson National, so it was just a hop, skip, and a jump that we could interact with one another. Anyhow, the questions went back and forth, and it got kind of boring because my boss and the mayor and the council were asking questions, and it was just flying over the top of my head because really they were talking about police department and all this other, and that was out of my realm at the time. So Mayor Engel, if anyone knew him, he used to chew on a cigar, and he put it down, and he looked up at Ron Butler and he says, "What about the police department?" And Ron said, "What about it? Well, could you do it?" He said, "Sure." And they talked a little bit more, and then the mayor said, "Who would do it?" And he looked at me and he said, "Fred." And I turned around startled and I said, "How do you spell it?" And that's how the Oro Valley Police Department began. I was a lieutenant and I was looking for a job, and that's how I first came here.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that's quite a deal. Well, my name is Sid Felker. I was not born in Tucson, but I grew up here, and I just met today a lady, Peggy.
Sid, you have to hold a little closer.
Is that better? Can you hear that? Is that okay?
Tip it like,
Huh?
there you go.
Okay, there, okay. And that we went to high school together back in the mid-50s. So this has been a worthwhile occasion. Listen, I met Jim Cree. Jim was a professor at the U of A, and Steve Engel. And I had just graduated from law school. I don't think I had been out of law school. I graduated in 1968, but I had to take the bar and do other things. So I really didn't start practicing until at the earliest, mid-1969. And my meeting with Jim and Steve was in early 1970. So I think I was 26, 27 years old then. And I thought it was going to be a great adventure, and it was that to an extent. But so we did not live in the city of Oro Valley, town of Oro Valley at that time, because the town was only about 1.5 miles square. It ran from
Hardy.
Hardy Road.
someplace in there, which is now Kathy's Sewing Machine Place in the Circle K on the corner, down a little bit west, took in the country club, and that was about it. But I knew the area fairly well because as a kid, I used to hunt in these foothills north of Lambert and in the riverbed. And, a lot of quail lived in those areas. So I knew the area well. They came in, and so I'm not sure just how it all worked out. I don't remember those early conversations necessarily, other than we were dealing with factual issues regarding the case. But anyway, I signed on to that. And one wonderful results of that representation is that I knew every parcel of land in that mile square and who owned it and kind of where they were leaning. And I also was able to identify vacant land. And my wife and I were able to purchase our home site, our current home site, on Linda Vista Boulevard, just off of Oracle, north of CDO High School. And we built our home there in 1977, and we've lived there since.
So I think you both alluded to this next question a little bit, but can you give people a picture of what it was to drive out of Tucson when you got to Ina Road?
Casa Sedova Shopping Center was kind of the spot in the Tucson area, and it was somewhat remote. There was not much north of River, but there was some there. But River Road, I'm speaking of, River Road kind of drew the mark. And then you went into some sparsely developed area, and then you got up to the Casa Sedova Shopping Center, which was really a beautiful place then and as now. North of Ina, it was really sparse. And there were a few subdivisions, and the Estes was a big home builder in town then, and you see a lot of the subdivisions that were built in the 60s and 70s were Estes homes. Estes had built a couple of subdivisions, one up near CDO High School, but there was not just, it was not intense development. We didn't have apartment complexes. We had very little commercial activity. And the country club really was the northern portion of it because there was past the river, north of the river, there just wasn't much activity up there other than quail hunting. But that was about it. And that was true, from Oracle all the way over to Dorney-Dale or ever. It was just, everything was sparse. Something I remembered about that is that Tucson has had some interesting real estate developers in town. One of the most interesting Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes, and I'm sure you recognize here after the World War, accumulated just a belt of property that would start, not exact, but kind of at Oracle and Tangerine now. It would go all the way south along I-10 and then headed east. So Howard Hughes not going to be developed. I mean, you couldn't even talk to him. But sure enough, in the mid-50s, I think it was when he was elderly, he started selling off of that stuff, parcels. And I was latter part of the 70s and 80s. My law practice had developed into really a tax practice, but because real estate was our main activity, it also involved a lot of taxes. So I became familiar with those larger parcels. And that's when Oro Valley started to look into growing because they had private owners that were willing to sell and allow development to take place. But Howard Hughes just had it locked out. But those periods came along.
Okay. Fred, what did, you were police chief, so you ran up and down Oracle Road a lot. What did it look like to you, or La Cañada or La Cholla? I mean, what did everything look like?
I don't know if La Cholla was there at the time. It was a dirt path running across the hills.
I think it was just a dirt road.
And that's when the kids would go out and run up and down with their dune buggies or whatever they were, their little Volkswagen things, and roll over out there and tear the desert up. Oro Valley, why we used pickup trucks, everyone asked why we used pickup trucks. Well, only the subdivision from Concordia around CDO High School to the south over to Hardy, those roads were paved. On the east side, they call it paved, but it was a chip seal and there was more potholes than there was pavement. The Linda Vista and that all that area, the Linda Vista citrus tracks, it was all dirt roads and it was washboard roads. And then as you drop down into the country club off Calle Buena Vista into the country club, that was all dirt roads. Now this is the area where there was a chop shop back in there where they were taking and cutting vehicles apart, and so we tried to sneak back in there at nighttime and catch them, but they'd hear us coming because the road was so bad, the truck would be rattling. Then eventually they started. Oracle Road was just one lane each way. Not very well lit, if lit at all, and it was high intensity traffic because of the mines up in San Manuel.
Great. So we know that Pima County and the city of Tucson did not want Oro Valley to occur. What's your opinion of why that was? Go ahead, Sid.
Well, I think with Tucson, by the way, Tucson was if Tucson and Pima County were partners, Tucson was the major partner. And most of the economic activity was occurring within its boundaries. The county was active, but you usually heard of the supervisors and the county activities really on the fringes. But that has changed somewhat now, but Tucson was the heavyweight party. They really had, but they were dependent upon enlarging their boundaries to get their share of various governmental payments and subsidies that way. So it was very much a very much dollar-driven project for Tucson to not allow any other municipality to be formed that could then start annexing some of the property that they would like to annex. So Tucson was very touchy about that subject.
Fred, you have anything on that?
Well, being with Rural Metro, we knew how the city of Tucson was trying to be very aggressive and very threatening. Rural Metro is a private corporation that provided fire protection to areas that were not served by any municipality or any county. At the time when the town incorporated, we had two stations, three stations. One at Tanque Verde and Wrightstown, and one at Ina and Oracle, and one down in Benson Highway. And every time we would respond to a fire, the city would have their crew out there to make fun of this dilapidated old fire department. And we were known as one-man kamikazes. We'd leave the station with one man, and we had reserve firefighters like the volunteer fire department. And they would come and join us on the fire scene. Tucson did not want Oro Valley. They told us, Rural Metro, don't even think about helping them. And that just gave me, I was kind of arrogant, just gave me more incentive to tell my bosses in Scottsdale, let's go for it. Okay. So, basically I lived 24/7, 365 for the fire department.
So Sid, you were involved in the early meetings with Jim Cree and Steve Engel and I guess some other people. What do you think was their motivation? I mean, why did they want to go through all this effort of creating a separate town?
Well, I think that their desire was to be able to control. They were not anti-growth, but their desire was to be frontline in the planning of the growth that would take place. And that was their motivation. And that's a little bit different than being anti-growth. That was not them at all, but they were willing to plan growth. Tucson, and I think we've seen it as how Oro Valley has developed. The people in Oro Valley, as it exists today, have been able to participate in their government offices and zoning hearings and planning meetings and all of the things that has gone on. That's been a wonderful gift, really. Now, that would not have occurred, at least to the extent it has here, but that would not have occurred in the town of Tucson. You would have had a council that was really not familiar with the area at all and doing what they thought they needed to balance their budgets. And so I think that was a motivating effort for a lot of people.
Fred, Fred, do you have anything?
I can remember Jim Cree in Lauren Rood talking about one of the main things that the town was wanting is protecting the zoning rights. On North Oracle Road, right south of what or right north of where the apartment complex is, there was a mobile home park in there. Now, that mobile home park was put in under the protest of 99.9% of all the homeowners around that area. They did not want it. They went to the Board of Supervisors, and basically they said, we think they need it and deserve it, and they gave it to them. And this was not an upscale mobile home park. It was, when the town incorporated, we found that we had a lot of problems in that area, in that particular community. It has now been demolished and is just vacant land.
Oh. What street is that, intersection is that near?
Near Kayak Concordia, just south of Kayak Concordia on the east side of the highway.
Okay.
And you'll see, I think there's a piece of plywood out there that says 9050. And that was the mobile home park.
Okay, okay. We also know that there was a significant opposition of people in the town to incorporation. The first election they had, a public election, the pro-incorporation largely lost that election. What was the motivation of the people who were opposed? Who wants to go first?
Okay, and I was not privy to all of those early conversations like that, but I believe there was questions raised that I would discuss with Jim and Steve, whether the town's budget would be sufficient to supply those minimum services. And there was, kind of question mark. I mean, it was nothing there that gave you a lot of good and fuzzy feeling about it. But my recollection is that was the issue that would generate opposition. Now, there was some that just didn't want any development there at all, ever, and they didn't want anything to do with the municipality there. They wanted to run it their own way. So that's.
Okay, yes.
I believe it was the tax structure that they were, the anti-incorporation people had their signs, our taxes are going to go up so many $100, and we're going to have a property tax, and this, that, and the other thing. And the budget that they presented was pretty decent, except they forgot that police officers cost money. So that's how we got involved. So.
Okay. There was I guess you could say there was a fight that went on from 1970 to 1975. From 1970 to 1974, it was Tucson and Pima County versus Oro Valley. But also in the background, there was a fight that occurred that went really to early 1975 of the two sides in the town. I know from descriptions that often one side sat on one side of the count table and the other sat on the other side, and whoever was the mayor was in the middle, sort of supposed to be a referee. What happened that brought the people together eventually? Because eventually people agreed, we have to make the town work. What happened? Go ahead.
Someone gave in. The council, the prevailing council, part of it, the original council were pro, I think there was 3 pro and 2 against. And so they did their bickering. And when the pro group presented their budget and they conducted their meetings pretty much in a calm manner, that the people that were opposed to the town finally said, we give up, we can't fight this. And then the town started to turn the corner and become more cohesive.
Sid?
I was really, interesting point, I never represented the town as the attorney. I represented Steve and Jim Cree as individuals that had put this petition together. By the time the incorporation came around, I was not a favored person at the City of Tucson nor the Pima County Board of Supervisors. But at that time period, one of the last things that occurred, several of the supervisors said, well, if we have to incorporate them, our next official step will be disincorporating them. And so we had that, we went to the meeting where they finally said, okay, you're incorporated. I had in my briefcase another lawsuit to forbid them from passing a disincorporation law. Now, they didn't do that, thank goodness, and we didn't have to fight that battle. But that was the kind of animosity that had been generated. And so that was the last thing that was said about the incorporation. Pima, our supervisors, really
Pima County also rejected the petition that was submitted at one point. That also had something to do with it. But you're right. I think people eventually just agreed they had to make it work.
Yeah.
Fred, you talked a little bit about the town in the early years, what it was like. Can you share any more about, how the council meetings worked, how the police department worked? I mean, what sort of things are different then than now?
Wow. The council meetings for the first 2 years were very tenuous. You could feel almost the sparks fly before the meetings, because there were those that no matter what the town incorporators wanted to do, the other ones was the naysayers. As time went by, the town was able to show through the shared sales tax and other taxes that they could take and prevail. And they were following through with improvements on the streets. The zoning, the zoning committee and the town council listened to the neighbors, and I know they voted down several large apartment complexes way back then. So I can't speak too much for today. I know there's still different opinions.
How many people did you have in your police force? What did they do?
2.5 people. We served the town of Oro Valley 24/7, 365. We had security officers from Tucson National. that the town made them reserve police officers. Some of them had some police training. Others, it was just there to patrol and to hold the scene until a full-time police officer showed up. I was not a certified peace officer when I first started. I was going back on a little bit on the police department. We set up the police department, and it was going to be a police-fire combination, cost effectiveness. City of Flagstaff had it, and it was working well, except we had two factions up there. You had the fire AFL-CIO firefighters union, and you had ASGOPS, the police union. And neither one of them wanted to be one or the other. They wanted either fire or police. Mm-hmm. So they, through legislation, made it so the town could not have a joint fire and police. So that's when rural, they still provided all the radio communications. They provided all the vehicles at the beginning, and then slowly start transitioning to the town and its own. I was sent to a police academy in Flagstaff. I would go there, I think, I forgot how many weeks, 8, 9 weeks, and I would come home on weekends, and then I had to do patrol duty. So it was quite a period of time.
Sid, you were involved with a lot of the meetings of the people involving lawsuits and things like that, correct?
Well, yes, and
talk a little bit about the role that Jim Cree and Steve Engel and some of the other people played in all that.
well, the procedure that was followed is from the legal lawsuit perspective. I would meet with Jim and Jim and Steve on as issues would arise, and then there were many of them, and I don't know that, maybe I'll touch on some here. But the Board of Supervisors, Jim and Steve got the petitions together, and the petitions met the requirement of Arizona law, had the multiple or the number of signatures that required, and the county had confirmed that they were valid signatures. The area was more than 6 miles from the city of Tucson. That was kind of a key issue, because if it had been less than 6 miles, they would have had to obtain the permission of the city of Tucson. But they were 6 miles. And that had happened 2 or 3 times in the process. And every time they would get their petitions ready, the city would annex another little strip of land to bring it within the 6 mile radius or range, until they reached the Tucson Mall. And the owners of the Tucson Mall wouldn't agree to an annexation. So that gave us a period of time to get the petitions filed, and you had to do a survey and a measurement and all of that stuff, so that took a while. But anyway, that lull in stopping the city of Tucson permitted the time for the petitioners to file their petition with the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors denied it. So we're not going to grant the incorporation. And so we had a trial. The trial was held in Florence, the next county up, and they brought witnesses as to why they should prevail, and we had a couple that why we should prevail. Our arguments basically was that we had met the statutory requirement, and the board had to do it. And we were sitting before Judge Mahoney, and he heard the trial, and he issued his order, and that the Board of Supervisors, his order basically said that these people have met all the requirements to form the town. We order you to issue their certificate of incorporation. That's called a writ of mandamus. You're mandating someone to do something. So that's kind of how it started. Now, this is the scary part. The judge, hit his gavel down and said, "I'm finding for Cree and Engel issue your order. And by the way, Mr. Felker, you prepare a statement of facts, because I'm going to issue a statement of facts that I agree with, and you prepare that and I'll review it and I'm going to issue an order. Well, I started working on that petition, and lo and behold, Judge Mahoney has a heart attack. And he just about dies from it. And so that put me in a quandary, because they couldn't tell. He was in the hospital, and then he came home, but he was not seeing anyone. And there was a second judge in Pinell County who he called the lawyers in, and he said, now I can't hear this case. He said, I can't rule on this case because I didn't hear the evidence. And he gave me a choice at that time, or gave us a choice. He said, I will let you start over. I'll just vacate the order and let you start over, and I'll hear a new trial for you, or you can wait until and see what happens with Judge Mahoney. Well, we waited 2.5 months, and finally I received a call from the clerk, and I and one attorney from the county attorney's office at that time went to Tempe, and we met Judge Mahoney in his home, and he signed the order and saw that it was filed, and so it became valid. Then the city, meanwhile, during that 2.5-month period, the city of Tucson had annexed another strip. And so they took the position on appeal that, hey, the board no longer has authority to issue that writ of mandamus because the town doesn't qualify. They're within 6 miles now. And so the board would not issue the writ. The Court of Appeals said, hey, the board is right. Once the town got within 6 miles, Oro Valley is not going to exist. And so they approved not issuing the writ of mandamus, or not enforcing the writ of mandamus. And so we were on the losing end at that point. So then we had to appeal it. And by the way, that was the Court of Appeals had divisions, and those were all local people, judges. All 3 of them were from Pima County. I don't know that made any difference, but we appealed it to the Supreme Court. And these are legal issues, but the Supreme Court held, no, we're going to reverse the appeals court and let the judges, Mahoney's decision, stay in force. So the board must incorporate Oro Valley. And they did that on a very somewhat technical basis. They said once the matter got into court, at the very first day that first petition was filed, the Board of Supervisors ceased to have any jurisdiction over the disposition of that matter that was subject to the terms of what the court decided. And so the Supreme Court said that stays in place with the court because the court decided to issue that writ of mandamus. And so with that, the town was incorporated.
Sid,
It's amazing that we have 2 cases, printed cases on this matter.
By the way, the town has, we have to take a break for just a second to get the
In this particular area?
Oh, is like you had on the mountain? We had quite a few down the wash, but nothing like to that magnitude.
Okay, yeah, we'll get to some questions a little bit later. Let me just continue. Sid, I wanted to ask you, and I had down as a question for you specifically, kind of relates to this. I remember you mentioning to me that many of the attorneys involved had accepted reduced fees to do the work for Oro Valley. Could you talk about?
It's been 50
Too
years.
far back?
I don't think it was too much, but I don't think, I remember them very distinctly saying, hey, we want to pay you. So they didn't ask me to do it free.
Okay.
So I'm sure I was paid something. just the out-of-pocket expenses for the court reporter fee
Okay.
arrangements.
Growth of Oro Valley from being there at the very beginning. Are you pleased with the way it is developed? Sid, you live here. Fred, do you live in the town or do you live?
I lived in the town.
You lived in the
Yeah, I
town.
lived- You'll get a mishmash of everything. I would like to see the town solidify those areas and
I agree with Fred. I'm certainly glad that health concerns, the traffic level, I'm sure the town is doing the best it can. I'm not sure what they would do, but for some reason, it seems to me that our traffic volume and controls are just not under, that's not in control now. And the type of, some of the developments, we've had an influx of large apartment complexes that I hope the town can control and manage and do that as well. But I've certainly been pleased. I've not had a big reason to come to the town on a personal basis and ask for this approval or that approval, but I always felt the door was open and that I could do that if I had an issue that I wanted to do. Now, I've had clients in Oro Valley that have involved in large projects, and I never once thought that Oro Valley was very easy on them. In fact, I thought they were pretty demanding sometimes. But overall, we live, my family raised, my wife and I acquired our Linda Vista property in 1974, and we built our home in 77. And it's changed.
I think we caught some guys trying to steal some of your construction materials.
Probably so. But on the other hand, I don't know when it occurred, maybe a missing dog or something like that, man, the local policemen have been right there and trying to help. So I'm perfectly safe. I think it would be different if we were in a larger metropolitan area.
So do you have any stories or any other things you'd like to share about Oro Valley?
I would be amiss if I didn't mention the name Orville Shields.
Yes.
Now, Orville had, he was the opposition, and he worked at the cement plant out at Marana. So he was a big guy, muscular guy. I don't think he ever slept, because during that trial, he went up to Florence every day. It was not unusual for me to be behind him on the trip up or him be behind me on the trip up and back. But he let us know he was against it. And he was against it from day one until he never gave up on it, I don't think. But Orville lived on Calle Buena Vista. He had a wonderful peach orchard there. And he would grow every year. That was his and I'm told, now that was in 70, I'm told that in the 50s he had another type of orchard, but at least in the early 70s he had a peach orchard. And during peach picking season, he would have baskets full out on Linda Vista there selling them. And, but he was against the incorporation.
Mm-hmm. Fred?
Orville was a character. Orville couldn't have a sentence without 15 cuss words in it. And it didn't make a difference where he was, if he was at the council meeting, on the street, or whatever. But I don't know how many phone calls I received from Orville Shields telling me to get my blankety blank butt or my guys down on Calle Buena Vista because some kid was squirreling up and down the road, and he was out there and he would scream and yell at them, so they'd just turn around and come back and do it again, and fishtail in front of the place. And Orville, he had his own personal radar gun before the town had a radar gun. So,
Orville would stand out on the street there with, if it was 25, he had painted 25 on it. He would have a chair out on Calle Buena Vista there, and if he thought they were going higher, he got there and waved the sign. And, but that was Orville.
if they had their windows down, they got an earful.
Yeah, oh yeah, right.
Okay, any questions from anybody? Yes, sir. Please stand.
Yes, I'd be interested in hearing about the role and development of the Oro Valley Country Club and Oro Valley Country Club Estates. And how, I imagine it's pretty much the core, and things grew from that. Is that fair to say that?
So the question is, how did Oro Valley Country Club Estates come about? What does it have to do with Oro Valley? Either of you wish to take that?
I remember when it was being under construction because they would pile up all their debris and torch it off, and then it would roll up the Concordia as far as the fire. But other than that, I don't.
Okay.
I think that the only connection I'm familiar, I don't think there was any legal connection that I was familiar with, but many of the people that were on the committee and that participated in the process of getting the petition signed and so forth were Oro Valley Country Club residents. But that's as far as it went.
Yeah, Oro Valley Country Club Estates started in 1958, so it was way ahead of Oro Valley. It was, and some people felt that the use of the name of Oro Valley would bring people in, would get more people from that community to agree to support it. So it became the name after they gave up on Palo Verde as the original name. Palo Verde was the original name. Any other questions? All right, well, I want to thank both of you for taking the time and sharing.
You're welcome.
Thank you.